Welcome back to another episode of Conversations with Coach La. I know I took a little break to celebrate Christmas and New Year's and practice some self-care. So you guys know you're tuned into the Urban Heat 98.1 FM. And as you know, we're streaming live on iHeartRadio, Facebook, and YouTube. So shout out to everyone who is listening and tuned in this evening. We are super excited that you're here. And we are impacting the communities we serve over here at the Urban Heat. And we are radio with a purpose. So you know what you need to do. You need to go ahead and follow us on Facebook. Go ahead and download that iHeartRadio app. Make sure you follow us on there as well. And if you don't know, you need to ask somebody and go ahead and bookmark our website, www.heat981fm.com, because we have an awesome cruise that's coming up and you need to make sure that you are there. But you guys know that you are tuned into Conversations with Coach La. You know what we do on this show. We have conversations about everything that's connected to life, love, stress, you name it, we'll talk about it on the show. So tonight, I have a special guest, because you know I'm always excited about all of my guests. But I have a special guest that's tuning in tonight, and she's not in Massachusetts, y'all. She's over there in the DMV area. And I got an opportunity to meet her at a conference that I participated in calling Redefining the Strong Black Woman Narrative. And me and her just clicked instantly. She was the first vendor at the beginning of the conference, and she had an amazing smile. And I said, I got to connect with this sister, and I got her journal. And I said, I need to get you on my show so that we can have a conversation. So she is a licensed mental health psychotherapist who's been providing therapy for over 10 years. She's also been a helping professional for over 15 years. Now, she has some degrees from some of our well-known universities, North Carolina Central, and also the University of Pennsylvania. She has a background both in clinical social work and counseling. And what's really dope is that she's both domestic and international, and she is connected to United Kingdom. I thought that was really interesting in her bio. She uses a lot of the same modalities that I use, but one of the ones that really stuck out to me is that she does EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which I think is pretty cool. And if you can do that work, I think you just have an amazing brain, because I couldn't actually tap in the way I wanted to tap in. I can follow somebody else's lead, but leading it, I still haven't tapped into that skill set. What I also love is we also both really work with high achieving professionals of color, primarily women, and they're experiencing anxiety and high levels of stress. She also does marriage and couple counseling, which I think is dope because I do that as well. She is a woman, of course, as I told you that already. She's a wife, a mom, and I want to welcome Miss Williams to the show tonight. How you doing, Miss Williams?
I'm
Mrs.
well.
Williams.
Mrs.
Let me correct
Williams.
that. She's Mrs. Williams. I'm so used to saying Miss, but she's Mrs. Williams. Got to get that right. Put some respect on her name. Good evening,
I'm
my
great.
sister.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited too. I haven't seen you since the conference.
I know, since
Right?
October. It's great to see you.
Yes, and I was emailing you and stalking you, and you finally responded. I said, she told me she was coming on the show, and then I couldn't find you. And then finally you responded, and I said, okay. Okay, it's meant to be. The universe then brought us together.
I did. I said I was coming. I meant it. I'm happy to be here. And it's only stalking if it's unwanted, so you're good.
Good. Yeah, you did give me your credentials. One of the other things I wanted to share that you said that I thought was really profound before we jump into the questions, which all of my listeners already know about, which is that you said, I'm someone who understands the stress and pressures that comes with being a sun-kissed woman and the expectations placed on us to focus on caring for everyone else before we care for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was so powerful. And it's sort of going to lead into our conversation tonight as well as we talk about redefining strength.
Right.
So tell me, what does therapy mean to you?
For me, it means a safe space that's for me specifically, that's focused on my needs without judgment, where my needs are the priority, And I think that's why I created a practice that focuses on exactly that and providing that support for other women like me.
Mm. Yes. So we talked a little bit about, how you came into the work.
Mhm.
So how did you come into becoming a psychotherapist? What inspired you? And I know we normally go into talking about the bet on self moment, and I'm wondering if you can tie that all in, because everybody comes on, I want to know about their bet on self moments, which is both a mindset, a mantra, and a lifestyle.
Mhm.
And that's a point in your life where you said, not anymore, not today. I'm going to take care of me. I'm going to put me first. I'm going to, start to prioritize my needs over everyone else's.
Right.
Yes, no is a complete sentence, right?
Mhm.
It's that epiphany, that moment where you say, I understand that this may have not been my fault, but this is my
Right.
responsibility to get me together, right?
Right. Right.
So have you experienced moments like that in your life?
Oh, absolutely. So to answer your initial question, I came into therapy because I was raised to believe that you should figure out what you enjoy doing and you're good at, but can make a living from. And I was always the person in my group of friends that everybody came to for advice. When people needed to talk, when people needed support, I was the go-to. And so I was like, well, I like talking and people like talking to me and I'm a pretty good listener. So maybe I need to be, at the time I thought, a psychologist, because back then that was like the first thing you heard of when therapy came up, right?
Yes, absolutely.
There's so much more out there other than psychology, right? So at the time I started out majoring in psychology and that was what drew me to the field. But then I learned about all of these other avenues and I actually went into social work, which led me to clinical social work. The interesting segue between that and my bet on me was that for the longest, I thought that because everyone came to me, that meant that it was my responsibility to take care of everybody else and to prioritize everybody else. And I think oftentimes as Black women, that's the message that we get from so many different avenues anyway. We get it in spiritual communities. We get it in our upbringing. We get it in society in general. And the narrative becomes that we're somehow supposed to be last on the list.
Right.
And I remember, so I knew I wanted to be a mom before I figured out what I wanted to do for a living. And I remember once I became a mom, once I was doing what I was doing for a living, because that was first, and then I became a mom, I remember saying, as a therapist, I am not going to be the person who does it for herself first. I'm going to be a mom, but I'm going to take care of me, because how I take care of me is what's going to influence who this lovely little person is going to become anyway, right?
Right.
And with all the skills and training, lo and behold, I still ended up focusing more, of course, on this little tiny person that I fell in love with than myself. And then, it took me 3 years, Coach La, 3 years. She was 3 when I finally was like, what are you doing? You can't take care of her in the way that you're meant to if you're not taking care of yourself first. So I think that was my first bet on self moment where I was like, okay, no, it's time for me to get me all the way together. And I started doing all of the things that brought me joy again and figuring out what still brought me joy and what didn't anymore, and just focusing more on meeting my own needs first and learning how not to feel bad about it, because that was a struggle initially.
Right. So awesome. I think we're having an echo. Do you have me playing?
I'm not hearing it.
You don't hear it? Maybe it's me. It probably is me. I don't know why I'm hearing an echo, but I am. If anybody else is hearing it, okay, it might be me. System difficulties, it happens. We are live. That's what happens on live radio. But what brings me to a comment that you made about being a mom, like a bet on self moment when you have that transition and you're responsible for another person. I think most of us, that's the one time when you're like, I'll sacrifice myself for my child. And if you're on an airplane, they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first. Right. And I think sometimes we don't realize that sacrificing self-care for child rearing or taking care of your children actually does them a disservice. So you got to take care of you. You have to be able to pour from a full cup, because then you can suffer from, irritability and depression and all these other things when you don't take care of yourself. Now, you said that was your first bet on self moment. That
was my first. My next one was a pretty big one, and it was actually what led to me starting my practice. So I was always the person that planned. I mean, I graduated high school, and at 17, I had literally a timeline for what my life was going to look like up until at least the age of 30. because I just knew everything was going to pan out exactly how I planned it, right? So clearly that's not what happened.
Who else can relate to having that timeline? I'm going to do this by the time I'm 25, I'm going to do this by the time I'm 30, and by the time I'm 40, I'm going to have my whole life together.
Yep, that was the plan. Meanwhile, I'm grateful that almost everything I planned has come to fruition. The only thing outstanding at this point is that doctorate, and that's coming too. It just didn't happen when or how I thought. Right. And so I remember 2020, the pandemic hit. I was married, still am. I'd already had my first baby girl. She was 6 at the time. So I'm homeschooling a 6-year-old. I'm 8 months pregnant with my second child. She was also planned, but obviously a pandemic was not, right? So now I'm 8 months pregnant, and there's this thing around me that's taking everybody out. And of course, I'm scared to go into the hospital, but we go into the hospital, we have the baby, she's born, she's healthy, we do well. Difficult pregnancy, even more difficult labor, but we made it through it. We get home, and I just didn't quite feel right. And I kept asking myself, why can't you get it together? Like, I was finding myself randomly crying, not knowing why, feeling sad, feeling irritable, more irritable and anxious than anything else. Now, mind you, this is the therapist who's clearly experiencing anxiety and clearly struggling with all of these adjustments. And I couldn't see it because, I'm close to the situation. It's me, right? And I keep asking myself, what is wrong with you? Why can't you just pull it together? Which is a very unhealthy thing to be asking myself. And I would have absolutely been saying to clientele, that negative self-talk is not healthy. And we would have been working on reframing that and all that great stuff, right?
All that.
But it's so much harder to apply it to yourself. So here I am with severe anxiety, not recognizing that that's what it is. And I'm suffering in silence. I lost my job in COVID. So now I got a new baby, a 6-year-old that I'm homeschooling, recovering from a rough pregnancy and delivery. The recovery itself was challenging on top of that, and trying to figure out where I'm going to work. And at that time, the reason that I mentioned earlier, me and my timeline, is because I always said I was going to open my own practice. But I, in my mind, thought I had to open it like later in life because I felt like I needed to have specific experiences in place before that happened. Well, I heard God tell me, it's time for you to make a move. And who am I to question that? So I did, because the thought I was having was, if I, as a professional Black woman who has all this experience and all these credentials and have been working with people and supporting them through the very thing I'm struggling with, and I couldn't see it, and I was suffering in silence, and I was being so negative towards myself internally, nobody else could see it. Nobody else knew. My husband could see I was struggling. Everybody else would have thought from the outside I was okay, right? Because we're taught to give off that perception, especially as Black women, that we're fine, even when we're not. And we're taught that that's what strength looks like. But that's not what real strength looks like. And so that was the moment where I really bet on myself. And I was like, you know what? I don't have to have everything lined up in a specific way at a specific time to do what I've been called to do. And now that I have lived through what this thing feels like, I'm uniquely qualified, that combined with my experiences, to bet on myself. And that's how I started my practice.
I also share a similar sentiment of needing to take time off and requesting the time off and not getting the time off and being told that was too long for me to be out as a leader. And I'm like, I know the signs of burnout. Before I burn out, I want to unplug, replenish myself, because it shouldn't take for me to have a whole breakdown as a mental health professional. I'm supposed to be able to know my own signs. And then when you do know your signs, people don't listen. Right? Or they give you pushback about, well, we can't let you go. I said, well, you don't even have to pay me. That's how bad it was. I was like, you don't have to pay me. I just want the time off. And they still was giving pushback about it. That's really what pushed me to go and start my practice and go full time was, I don't want to ever be in a position again where I need something from me and I can't do it because I need permission from somebody to go take care of myself. Or it has to get so devastating that I'm in the hospital or something happens and you have no choice but to accept it now because I'm incapacitated. I said, oh no, you won't be working me like a mule.
Right. I couldn't agree more.
Not today. And God said, you know what? You need to, I've talked to my family and everything, but you're scared. I don't know about you if you felt scared, but I was petrified.
Yeah.
That anxiety knot that was in my gut the day I hit submit on that resignation letter.
Yes.
It was debilitating. I thought I was going to really die. I was like, what is going on? I was just quitting. And you're just quitting. That's it. I was I was so wound up about it. So, I definitely can relate to that push that you need to go and start your practice. So congratulations.
Thank you.
On making it on the other side.
Yeah.
Now, you got more bet on self moments? Or those are your two major ones?
I'm going to say those are my two major ones.
So writing these books, because you have two projects that you completed.
Yeah.
Were those bet on self moments too?
You know what? You're right. Yes, they were. Yeah, when I started the practice, I outlined, because like I said, I plan and I organize, right? So I outlined some goals just in general. They didn't necessarily have timelines because I've learned that, you can plan, but you need to be flexible. And one of the things that I wrote down in my first month of practice was that I wanted to write a book. I thought I was going to be writing some sort of chapter book. That's not what God had in mind. And I swear I opened my practice and he just kept unfolding his plan little by little by little. And it was amazing because it was not at all in my control, but I was enjoying all of it. And I started working on what I thought was going to be a planner. And then I thought it was going to be a journal. That's my baby right there, my third baby. And then I said to myself, I need to work on something that's going to support the many, many, many more women that I just can't actually work with myself. And I also know realistically, there's so many of us in our community that are not going to get into a therapy space for multiple reasons, because of resources, because that's not what's promoted in our community, because they're afraid, because it's not something that's common. Like there's a variety of reasons, but I wanted to create something that could support more women beyond what I can do and goes beyond my reach. And so the book you just held up was my first baby, my first growth book journal. So it's a combination of a workbook and a journal. And the focus is growth in all of the ways: personal growth, professional growth, growth in how we interact with family, just being intentional about promoting how we take care of ourselves, and that self-care being not only when there's a crisis or something is wrong, like you said, not waiting until we break down, but also taking care of ourselves in the ways we need to daily and in the ways we interact professionally and personally and in all of the spaces that we're in.
What I love is when I have guests that bring in the spirituality piece of like listening to that inner voice.
Yeah.
Some people call it God, some people call it the universe. We all have different names for it, but the sister's growth book journal, like it's beautiful. It's so colorful. It just makes you feel good. Guys, you got to go get this. This is a great, if you got young women or just any woman in your life, this is a great book. It's so nice. I don't even want to write in it, to be honest. I mean, it's just so well done. It's a conversation piece, but from emotional awareness, affirmations. One of my favorite pieces of it is the self-compassion letter to yourself. And let's talk about that, because as you were going through these bet on self moments, right? What were some of the things that you used to sort of pull yourself through as a therapist? Because, people don't think we go through anything, right? Like we're just exempt from it because we're therapists. We're perfect. Life is just good. No, honey, life be showing up and life and on us too.
Yeah.
So how did you work through that? Despite having all the tools, it didn't mean that stuff didn't still show up for you. So what did you do?
I got a therapist. That's what I did. Therapists have therapists. And I don't know why people think that we don't, but we do. I did continue to do the things that were helping me. Like exercise was a huge part for me. Starting my day with something for myself, like forcing myself to do something to take care of me first, no matter what. That became a regular practice for me. For me, that means exercise first thing in the morning. It gets me going. It gets my energy up. If I'm tired and I don't feel like it, it takes me into a new headspace. For other people, that can be multiple things. But for me, prioritizing time for myself first thing. So before I give anybody else my time and energy, I focus on me. I wake up, I pray, and the very next thing I do is go work out. If my kid's schedule will change and I don't have a choice about that, then I get them to school, and then the next thing I do is go work out. But outside of that, I really started doing the work to be more self-reflective and to work through some things that had showed up that I didn't realize was there. And so I had to reach out for help. Another thing that we're not taught as Black women and as women of color, we're taught that we're not supposed to need help because we're supposed to support and take care of everybody else. And we're taught that asking for help is somehow weakness, when in fact there's strength in recognizing what you need and then doing something about it. And so that's what I did.
So it sounds like that's a great segue into what we're talking about tonight, which is let's have a conversation about redefining strength. And you made a great point that therapists have therapists too. Yes. And we also have to ask for help. And a good friend of mine, 𝖫𝖠, she has, goodness, why my brain, I love when my brain does this to me, but strong Black womanitis. She coined that term, strong Black womanitis. So shout out to 𝖫𝖠, and one of the things that she put in there was not asking for help and making a way out of no way and doing the most, right? And some of the criteria for diagnosing yourself with strong Black womanitis. And it ties into this whole idea of you asking for help does not mean that you don't have strength. It takes a lot of strength to say, I need support. Absolutely. And I don't think that that's something that we've been taught as women of color. That's been seen, I would say, I'll go out and say that was weakness. You're not supposed to. I'm gonna do it myself. I don't need nobody.
Right. And a lot of times I feel like we see all of these women from generations before us who that's how they operated. But I think that something that we miss in translation is that there are a lot of women from generations before us that operated in that way out of necessity. But when things change and you no longer have to operate in that way, then it's important to start to ask questions like, why? Why were people previously operating like that? Why am I operating like that? Is it necessary for me to operate like that? And I decided it was not necessary for me. And I wanted to create a space where we made it permissible for people to take care of themselves and do whatever that looked like and not think that it was somehow a reflection on their strength. Because asking for help doesn't make you weak. Crying doesn't make you weak. There's so many benefits to crying. I mean, you release so much, and most people feel so much better after they cry, and yet we're taught that crying is weakness or that asking for help is a problem. Meanwhile, you suffer in silence, and how is that strength? Choosing to suffer in silence is not a sign of strength either.
No, it's resilience.
Exactly.
And
avoidance is temporary.
And it shows up somewhere else. So as we look at, the increases of anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and all of those different things.
Yes.
I would, my clinical opinion is that most of that is coming because people don't have spaces to say how they really feel. Most of us are engaging in people-pleasing behaviors.
Yeah.
Most of us are afraid of disappointing people, afraid of rejection, and all of these other things that are uncomfortable emotions.
Yeah.
So we're doing everything in our power to avoid uncomfortable emotions.
Yeah.
Right. So you probably already know this and talk to a fellow psychotherapist, but our brain being rigged in three ways, right? We want to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and find the easiest path points to those two things. So if that's constantly sort of your brain's normal MO, you have to work on your frontal lobe and other places of logic to not have you do what's instinctively your nature. So when people are like struggling with any type of mental health thing, it's not really you. Your brain is an amazing thing, but it also can work against you, which is why you have to do the work, right? When we're telling people to do affirmations and EMDR and go to therapy, these are all ways of shifting and reframing your brain. And we don't think we need to do that, but you have to work it. It's just like any other organ or muscle. If you don't use it, you lose it.
Absolutely.
No pun intended, right? You lose your mind.
Yeah. I could not agree more. That's one of the things that I love about EMDR is that you're literally reprocessing things that you've already experienced, and creating a new pathway for where your brain is filing that information, but in a more complete way. And as a result of the temporary discomfort that you go through when you're working through that, you get long-term relief. And I think that's the part that we miss, is that we don't need to avoid being uncomfortable. Even though we don't like it, even though it doesn't feel good, the things that are good for us don't always feel good, and that's okay. But temporary discomfort for long-term relief, I would say, is an excellent trade-off.
Listen, I would agree. So let me take a moment. Once again, you guys are tuned into the Urban Heat 98.1 FM. This is Conversations with Coach 𝖫. I am your host, therapist, Coach 𝖫. And I'm super excited tonight because I'm talking to Mrs. Monique Williams about redefining strength. And we're streaming live on iHeartRadio. If you haven't done so already, please go and download that app and follow the Urban Heat. You can also tune in via YouTube and Facebook. So we have multiple different pathways for folks to connect. Shout out to everyone that's listening already. Shout out to Miss Juanita Marty. Thank you so much, Vanessa, Rashid, and Sandra Jackson. We appreciate you. I appreciate you for being listeners and tuning into the Urban Heat, because we definitely are radio with a purpose. So back to this conversation about redefining strength.
Yeah.
How did you learn to do that, right? Because, I love Oprah, and Oprah, there was an episode or interview, and she was just like, when her radio show changed or her TV show changed, and it shifted to her showing people, because it was like you're talking at them or talking with them, but no one's actually showing people how. And I think sometimes we don't think about how much everything we do is a learned behavior from lived experience, or someone told you. But did you ever kind of sit and go, well, why, like you said earlier, why do I do this? Or why did grandma do that? And is it still relevant now? Right? Am I not supposed to take what my ancestors and my elders went through and learn and reframe it? Or do you just keep doing the same thing without any context?
Right.
So how did you learn to do what you were doing? Did it just come from your clinical skills, or was it something else that sort of sparked, I need to do something different?
I think it was a combination of things. First of all, I hit that point that we were talking about not wanting to hit, when none of the skills that I had were working anymore. Like, I was good, or so I thought, at taking care of myself. And I had like my toolbox of things that I do to take care of myself. And I always tell my clients, one of the things that is a great indication that it's time to do something different is when you're doing all of the things that you would normally do that help, and they're just not helping anymore. And when I hit that point that I was experiencing severe anxiety and didn't even realize it and didn't know what to do with it, I feel like God made it clear that it was time to do something different. But the other piece for me was I recognized what my internal voice was like at that time, the things I was saying to myself that no one else could hear, and they weren't kind. And that wasn't like me. And so I knew that it was time to do something different. And I started small. I always tell my clients, choose something that you can do now that is going to be helpful. Just even if it's just in this moment, start with that. If you know what your goal is, and you start with small steps and you work on those things one at a time, then that makes a big difference. So for me, it was a combination of mindfulness, which is all about staying in the current moment and not focusing on the past, which I can't control, or the future, which I can't predict, because focusing on either one of those areas tends to increase anxiety and stress. So I chose to be intentional about focusing on the current moment, which included how I prioritize taking care of myself. And then the other part was practicing self-compassion. And that's why those are two of the primary things in the book that I talk about a lot, because those two skills alone can be so beneficial, and you don't necessarily have to have a therapist in front of you to start working on those things until or if you have the opportunity to have a therapist or a coach or someone else for support. So for me, that self-compassion piece was huge. I had to be kinder to myself. I had to give myself space to figure out what I needed and then do it, and not say negative things to myself or not take on guilt because I was prioritizing myself, and not take on the responsibility of other people's feelings. None of those things are what strength looks like either. It looks like knowing that I'm not responsible for other people's feelings, and I don't need to be guilty for taking care of myself. And I should take care of myself first, because then I'm my best self for me first, and then for everyone and everything that I love.
Right. It's a phenomenal thing when you have those epiphanies and you have those deep dive self-reflections where you can actually tap in to what you're actually feeling. And I think that's one of the things about therapy that I think is good for therapists to have a therapist, because you still need a sounding board.
Right.
And not everybody is doing the work that we're
Mhm.
doing, taking accountability for how they're showing up,
Right.
and having someone to actually help you with that.
Mhm.
Or just, sometimes it's just being able to talk it through with someone who understands and gets it.
Yeah.
I know that's how I feel about my therapist, who's also an executive coach. I got all of these hats and
Mhm.
things that I'm doing. And sometimes it's just that I need to talk it out, right?
Yeah.
And have somebody who is non-biased, non-judgmental, and a
Mhm.
good sounding board to help me kind of see, okay, or my blind spots. That's a good way to
Absolutely.
put it. Your blind spots, because when you're in your own stuff, sometimes you can't see your blind spots,
Right.
or there's not somebody necessarily to hold you accountable to what you said you would do long after the mood you set it in has left you.
Right. Mhm.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, you need that. You need to be able to have, I call it your team, right? Your mental health team.
Yes.
That's going to come in and sort of make sure you can keep having your cup full, so that
Yep.
we can keep doing the work that we do. So I think that's phenomenal. Once again, you guys are tuned into the Urban Heat 98.1 FM. Shout out to all of the listeners and everybody who's tuned in through iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Facebook. We appreciate you. We are radio with a purpose. And I'm talking to Miss Monique, or Mrs. I keep calling her Mrs. Monique Williams. And can you tell us, so where do you practice now? So we talked a little bit about that, because you're not in Massachusetts and you cover a wide area. And we're hot commodities. Women of color or Black therapists in general.
Yeah.
We are we're highly sought after. I don't
Mhm.
know how your practice is, but mine stays full. Thank
Yeah.
you. I'm very thankful for that. This is not a complaint for everybody that's listening. But on the same note, it's like a lot of people need support and help,
Yes.
and we don't want to burn ourselves out. So I have a threshold of how many clients I'll take. Right. So
Absolutely.
when you spoke about doing your journal and writing your book so you could reach more people, that's why I do this show. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I reach all these people. I'm talking about therapy. I'm encouraging
Mhm.
people. I can't take any more clients, but I can do a
Right.
radio show once a week for an hour.
There you go. Exactly.
This is my
Impact.
solution. And I like to talk. I like to talk to people.
There
So
you go.
hey, here we go. And this was also, I think, planted similar. God was like, you need to go and do a radio show.
Mhm.
Shout out to Mr. Marv Neal. And I was like, Marv, I got an idea for a show. And I was like, I'm gonna call it Conversations with Coach 𝖬𝖾. He's like, that's dope. Okay, when you gonna do it? And so I'm like, oh shoot, I'm about to really do a show. And here I am. Today actually is season 3.
Oh,
So you are
we're
the
kicking
first
off season 3
episode.
right now?
We're kicking off season 3.
Nice.
The goal is for me to get to 50 episodes
Okay.
of the show. I'm almost close, because they claim most people give up before you get to your 50th podcast or radio
Oh.
show. People sort of like, oh, I'm not
Okay.
making no money. I don't have any sponsors. You get discouraged. So
Okay.
I'm betting on myself every week, y'all. Thank y'all for
Absolutely.
being a part of my bet.
That's right. There will be no giving up.
Every week. I forgot what I was asking you because I'm running my mouth so much.
You were asking, I remember, you were asking about where I practice.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I practice both as a therapist, which means that the states that I'm licensed in, I can provide therapy in those states. And those states are Delaware, which is where I'm physically located, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida. But I also work as a mental health coach. And for a bit of clarification for folks, coaching is usually for milder needs, not necessarily needs that would be considered severe. For example, if you have severe needs, or usually the provider that you're working with can do an assessment and determine what would be most useful, and ideally is making that decision with you, because your provider should not be making decisions for you. But as a mental health coach, I work with folks anywhere. because as a mental health coach, there are no restrictions in terms of who I can work with. But as far as licensure and my actual therapy practice, I work with folks in Delaware, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Florida.
That is on the territory. So I'm still hearing that I have some echoing in the line. I know you didn't hear it, but I know I was hearing echo, but I thought it was just on my side. So if y'all are hearing echo, the urban heat god is trying to fix that. So thank y'all for letting me know, but I did hear it. So hopefully, we'll get that fixed momentarily. So once again, you guys are tuned into the Urban Heat 98.1 FM. This is Conversations with Coach 𝖫. I am your host, Coach LA. And I'm super excited because I have Mrs. Monique Williams, and we are talking about redefining strength. So that being said, how did you come about deciding what area you wanted to work in and then also stretching it across such a wide amount of states?
Well, okay, so Delaware is where I live. So naturally, that was where I was going to become licensed. Pennsylvania is where I was first licensed because I used to live in Pennsylvania because I went to the University of Pennsylvania. And it just made sense if I was going to be licensed in Delaware to also provide support for folks in Pennsylvania because it's right next door to Delaware. North Carolina, interestingly enough, is where I was considering relocating to. And so in preparation, I decided to get licensed there as well. That's actually where my immediate family lives, even though we are originally from Brooklyn, New York. So that was how North Carolina came about. And then Florida, which is one of my favorite states for mental health, in the pandemic, well, let me not say that because it might have been the case before the pandemic, but I only became aware of it in the pandemic that you can become a telehealth provider with Florida and not be required to actually be in the state or, have to go through all of the same kind of bureaucratic stuff we have to go through to get that physical licensure in other states. So it was very easy to do in Florida, and it offered another state where I could support more people.
Wow. That's really awesome that you picked so many different places to go. So it seemed like it was more about what was the easiest process, because we don't really talk a lot about barriers to entry to be able to access therapy, right? So those are some of the things that we face as therapists is, can we operate in a particular state? But you also do coaching. So one of the great things, which again, why I say you're like my kindred sister, coaching allows us to do everything we want to do that therapy doesn't. So there's always a caveat. There's always a little, way we can make things work. So this is why I often refer to my practice. Can you still hear me?
There we go. You came back. Now I can hear you again.
Yep. So originally I was a life coach first, and the fact of people needing more support is what led me to go to social work school and become a licensed independent clinical social worker. Might I add, that's the highest level you can be.
Yes. And might we add that social work is the most diverse route to do it. I'm just saying.
Yes. I can't go any further than where I'm at. Only thing I can get now is a doctorate. There's nothing else. As far as licensure, I've hit the pivotal point in my career path, which is pretty exciting. I'm pretty proud of that. And you're a licensed social worker as well, but I think it's different in terms of your state and my state, or is that also the highest that you can go?
It's also the highest. It's just different different letters. So it's an LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker for my state, for all of the states that I'm licensed in. So it's titled differently, but it's the same. I'm at the height of what I can do in terms of licensure.
That's what's up. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Super dope. Proud of us. Go Black girl magic in the building. So tell me about the process of creating the growth book.
So first I decided on the population, like who I wanted it to be for, which naturally was for the clientele I focus on, which is professional Black women in general. I specifically focus on high achieving Black women, and a third of my clientele is other therapists, which I love. I love working with other therapists. But when I was working on it, one of the first things I did was decide what would be most useful for women like me. And the thing that came really naturally was I was essentially writing a growth book journal for me, right? Like for other women who look like me, for other women who've had similar experiences to me. Of course, there's difference. There's, there are things that vary, but it came naturally because it's my lived experience as well. And so I focused on the things that I felt would be most useful for us. And the feedback that I got was amazing. Like it's amazing when you create something with an intention and you get to see that intention be received over and above what you could have asked. Like at the conference, I met so many women who, when they actually looked at it, like to see them feel seen and feel like somebody understood exactly what it was that they needed, that's the best part of the book for me.
Yes, I think you did a really wonderful job of mapping it out. Like you said, not everybody is going to take the path to go sit with a therapist.
Right.
I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And I know this is not a popular opinion, right? So this is a perspective.
Okay.
But ideally, we want people to get to the point that they have tools.
Yes.
Resources, and that they know how to check in with themselves. They become so self-aware that they can work through problems.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you want to put us out of business, right? If everybody were doing that, then you wouldn't need us. We wouldn't have a job. That would ideally be great, because then what we have more people that were not judgmental. We would have people practicing self-compassion. We would have people taking better care of themselves. We would have people taking accountability. Like the world would be utopia to a certain extent.
Right.
But that's not realistic. We all know that that's not gonna come to fruition. So tools like this are great starts. Like it's almost like a starter kit. And what I love about this, it usually says this is not a replacement for therapy. If you find that these things are triggering you, if you find that this is opening up doors to other things, please go seek professional help.
Yes.
That's pretty much what these are supposed to do, is to open you up to self-discovery.
Absolutely. And that was one of the goals. Like I wanted people to walk away from this knowing themselves better, being more aware of what they're feeling and why they're feeling that, and recognizing if it's something they can work through using some of the tools in the book, or do you need more support in order to do that? And maybe you use the book alongside that. I have clients that I'm still working with who are using the book in between our work together. And I think that sometimes people think that therapy is like the short-term thing, and sometimes it is. But other times it's this long-term discovery and exploration and treatment type of situation. And I have some clients I see once a month, for example, but in between that time, they're doing their own work. And they started out, I'm seeing them weekly, and I'm happy to support at whatever frequency is needed initially. Right. But when I see them growing to the point that they don't need to be seen that frequently, then that means that the growth that we're hoping they're going to have, which is the whole point of our work with them, is happening. And seeing it is amazing. Like one of the best things that I feel is a reward is when a client gets to the point that they're like, I recognize what I need to do. If and when I need to come back, I will. And they grow to a place where they don't really need. We essentially work ourselves out of a job, and that's okay, because that means we did it right. And one of my primary goals was for people to walk away with like tangible skills that can help them to feel better or different, because sometimes you don't necessarily feel better. You feel different because you're still in that process and you haven't gotten to better yet. But I wanted people to know, like, you go to therapy and you learn about behavioral activation, which is all about engaging in things that are meaningful and enjoyable for you, and engaging in physical activity because it gets your heart pumping and it gets the serotonin going, which I like to call the feel-good hormones. And then you start to physically feel better, right? But people don't know that if they're not in therapy. But if you put it in a book, then people can learn that, and you can give them tangible steps that they can take, even if they don't have a therapist in front of them.
And those things are really the most significant, is how do you build and put things in your toolbox?
Absolutely.
Right. And recognizing the things that you can do on your own before you go seek external things to make you feel better. And I think, and that could be a lot of different things. We can go through all of the things from sex to gambling to shopping. A lot of that is not, you're not connected to what you may be feeling. There's an uncomfortable emotion that you're trying to get rid of.
Right.
Right. And those vices that are allowing you to numb yourself. And what we really need to learn how to do, and I think you said this earlier, is how to feel and realize that it's okay to not always feel great. Absolutely. Right? Stop trying to avoid heartbreak and disappointment and all these things, but how to actually tap into your body to see how you feel when these things are happening, so that you can realize they're all just feelings. Happiness, sadness, anger, frustration. They're all feelings, and they're like waves. I used to tell my clients that, like, imagine emotions are like you're at the beach and you get hit with a wave. It hits you and then it goes away. Yes, you know the wave was there, but then it leaves.
Right.
So mindfulness is like that. It's just like, let it float. You don't got to judge it. You ain't got to hold on to it. You ain't got to ruminate on it. It shows up. You go, oh, wow, hi. Okay, the little thoughts there. I see you. Hello.
Yeah. I noticed you there.
I noticed you. All right. How long you going to be here for? All right. And then keep doing what you're doing. And guess what? Another thought will come.
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons.
Practice it. All the people that's on the live, trust me, you think a million thoughts a day. There's only some of them, though, that you ruminate and you hold on to and you breathe life into it. But if you didn't breathe life into it all day long, you're like, oh, wow, that's a screen. And she has on an armored shirt. Oh, wow, I like her glasses. And look she has a nice smile. You're thinking stuff all day.
Right. Yep.
And then there's certain ones you hold on to and you just keep, even though it's long gone, you bring it back. You just keep bringing it back. Now, what's your thoughts on that? On why people keep bringing back the thoughts? Because this connects back to redefining strength.
Yes. I mean, I think that we have all of these thoughts, just like you just said, and we're not necessarily aware that we're having all of these thoughts, but they're there consistently. And I think that when people don't take the time to reflect or to give themselves permission to recognize what they feel or to simply feel whatever the feeling is, then we tend to find ourselves going back because we don't understand and because we have questions and because we haven't done that reflection type of work, right? And I mean, I feel like feelings are not necessarily good or bad. They're just feelings. You might not feel good, or you may feel good or bad as a result of whatever that feeling is linked to, which is often a thought or a behavior or something else that's there. But I think that emotional awareness is sometimes lacking. And as a result of it, we keep going back trying to gain understanding. And not everything is meant for us to understand, but that's not something that's a popular opinion either.
That we go back because there's something that we still want to understand. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
And I always say her name wrong. Please forgive me, y'all, if I say it wrong. One thing you'll learn about me, I do mispronounce things, blame it on my head and not my heart. I should have got hooked on phonics when I was younger. I have to literally pull up the dictionary on Google and press the pronunciation button on some words. So, but Miss Van Zandt, she was talking about that in one of her books, and she was discussing us not being able to sit in places of discomfort. And because we're not able to do that, we struggle in life because for whatever reason, some of us were conditioned to think that it was supposed to be easy and everything was supposed to go our way. We suffer from cognitive distortions that life is supposed to be fair. And if I do all good things will come back to me. And to a certain extent, that's true. But for the most part, we know bad things or not so great things happen to people who didn't deserve it every day. Right. And I know that can be a difficult reality for us to hold on to. Right. So a lot of these things are not, popular opinion. The reality of it is we need to get okay with somebody telling us no. Right. We're supposed to learn that when we was little. Right. We were supposed to learn how to be okay with not getting our way all the time. But the more you can accept someone else's no, right, you can you'll be able to say no. Right. Usually people who have a hard time accepting a no also have a hard time telling people no. That's what I found. What have you found?
It's funny that you said that because I have been told in my personal life that I don't like to hear no. Yet I don't have a problem telling people no. I've had to learn how to tell people no. Let me correct that. Past tense, I had a problem telling people no. But I had to learn that it was okay to say no and that it was indeed a full sentence. But something that you said that sparked a thought for me when you were talking about discomfort, there's a song, and I can't remember who the artist is. It's a gospel song, though. It's a hip hop gospel song.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a line in this song that has stuck with me since the first time I heard it. And he said, get comfortable with being uncomfortable because you're being stretched. And I feel like we forget that because we always want to get to the outcome. We want to get to where we've been stretched and all these great things are happening, but we don't want to deal with the process. We don't want to be in the moment. We don't want to actually go through the things that are going to get us there. But that's the uncomfortable part. And that's where you're being stretched. And there's so many different things that we learn in those moments that are going to set us up to be successful for that outcome that we're trying so hard to get to and rush past the discomfort. But we can't do that.
So true. It's one of my analogies I use with clients often. You say you like to work out. So you had a personal trainer before?
I have.
Okay. I have to.
I never liked them. I like the outcome. I don't like doing the work.
Right. So you think about that, right? When you're working out, you're stretching your body, you're stretching your muscles. I don't care what nobody say. That don't feel good. Working out, you like the, I like the after effects, but right in the moment, man, that stuff be hurting.
Yep. Depending on what you're doing, that's accurate.
It would be a struggle. And then once you get comfortable with that, a good trainer, what do? They give you some more weight, right?
They need you to stretch.
More weight, or they make you stay on a little bit longer. They push you, right? A good therapist, in my opinion, similar to a good trainer, is not one that makes you comfortable.
Right.
It's not one. It's the one you go, I hate you. Oh, I don't even want to come back and see you next week. I really
it's funny because I've heard that, and when they say that, I always say, "Thank you. You're telling me I'm doing my job."
right. Like you listen. I know you don't like some of these conversations, but did you come here just to stay me? You know, and I do a lot of validating too. I really do. I have like they call me a nurturing beast. One of my clients gave me that name. You're like a nurturing beast. I was like, okay, I'll take it. So it's like at the same time, I'm like, listen, you are doing a good job. You are doing a good job. The fact that you even show up for therapy every week, or you even show up for yourself at all, you're doing a great job. For some of my clients, just getting up, brushing their teeth, and washing their behinds is a big accomplishment.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I'm going to say, okay, well, how long are we going to stay here?
Yeah.
Because I know from most of us, we have desires, dreams, and goals and things we want to achieve.
Right.
Right. And mental health, trauma, you know, past parenting, whatever. There's things that get in the way and cloud you from being able to be motivated to get to where you are. And then that those core beliefs about self show up, and then imposter syndrome shows up, and all next thing you know, you're demotivated and you don't think you can achieve anything.
Right.
So we got to like clean all of that out. And so when we think about redefining strength, right, it's being able to say, I'm hurting in the first place.
Yeah.
I need to cry. I don't like what such and such said. I don't want to go around such and such. I don't want to go to the family Thanksgiving. It's those, I call that the ugly side of self-care, because it's not just getting the maintenance side, your nails and your hair and getting a massage and going to the gym. Like that's the maintenance side. But the hard side is, no, I'm not coming to Thanksgiving this year because you're going to have Billy Joe, who I already told you molested me, at the table, and we ain't going to never deal with that. So I ain't coming. Right. Like the stuff you want to say, you know, or you know what, I am going to file for this divorce, or no, I'm not ready to have kids. Stop asking me. Or I don't want to be married. Actually, I'm gay. You know, I'm non-binary. I don't even, it's all these things you want to say, but you are too afraid to say. Right. Right. That's self-care too.
It is. That's the self-care that doesn't necessarily feel good in the moment, but it's going to serve you so well long-term. And that's not the self-care that we talk about. No. We talk about all those things that you said. And just to be clear, I do all those things that you said, and they're great. So we're not saying don't do those things. But if you're going to take the time to take care of yourself on the surface, then we need to go beneath the surface as well. Because if everything looks good on the surface, but beneath the surface, we haven't done the work, the surface will show eventually what's going on beneath the surface as well.
That part. So when we talk about redefining strength, it's also finding the strength to do that deep dive.
Absolutely.
To go to the root of a situation. Yeah. To do that self-reflection. To go to therapy. And actually, when this is a good one too. Going to therapy doesn't just mean showing up. That's okay at first. But eventually you're going to have to do your inner self work, the assignments that the therapist, like you're going to have to bring some stuff, right, to therapy. So some people come and they go, I don't know what I want to talk about today. Okay, well, I don't know what you want to talk about today either. Now I can tell you what we talked about last week.
Right.
But, you know, I could definitely go there, but you got to come. You get out of therapy what you put into therapy. Would you agree with that?
I do. I absolutely agree with that. I've had clients show up on numerous occasions that say, I don't think I have anything to talk about today. And before the session is over, they're in tears, or they've reflected, or they've learned something, or there's something that they need to explore. And sometimes when my clients show up like that, I say, okay. And I just allow for silence. And a lot of us are not comfortable with silence. But things come up in the silence. And next thing you know, there's something that you would like to talk about, or something that you think you could work on. And we go from there.
Ooh, that's silence, right? Most of us, our trauma response is to keep busy.
Yeah.
We don't know how to sit still and be with our thoughts. We run from our thoughts. Our thoughts make us so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I've had clients literally say, I can't sit with myself. I got to be on the phone. I got to be doing something, touching something, talking to somebody. I don't know how to sit still and just check in with me and how I'm feeling. Because if I did that, I would fall apart. And that's the truth for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because if they sat still, they would fall apart. If they didn't do their vices, they wouldn't be able to cope.
Yep. And I think the pandemic brought a lot of that out because we didn't have a choice but to sit still. Where were you going? Everything shut down. And
well,
that's
people
when
like
for a
me
lot
had a
of
whole
us-
life. I had a whole life on Zoom. I was going to Zoom parties. I was doing Zoom trivia. I was doing Zoom Zumba.
Okay. You was getting it in.
I was Zooming. I was so tired of Zoom, but I mean, I did.
I didn't have no
Zoom.
choice but to sit down because I was recovering from having a baby after a rough pregnancy and a rough delivery. And I can say from experience, even as a therapist, at that time, I was struggling with just being. And then when I had no choice but to be, that's when everything came up. And that's when I recognized that it was time for me to do the work on a deeper level and that I needed to provide a space because there were so many other women like us who were experiencing the same thing. And we need support.
You know, I think we just kind of summed it up. We got like 7 minutes left. And I think when we talk about redefining strength, sort of in general, and closing, what do you want people to take away from what you want them to know about redefining it?
First of all, that you get to define what strength looks like for you. No one else gets to define that. And anyone else's opinion on it is none of your business. They're allowed to have their opinion and you're allowed to disregard it because other people's feelings are not your responsibility. So know first that you get to define what strength looks like for you. And it can look like one thing right now and a completely different thing 5 minutes from now. And that's okay. Because I think one of the most important things about how we define our strength is flexibility. Be flexible with yourself, be kind with yourself, and defy the idea that strength has to look like for you what it would look like for anyone else. Because comparison is one of the quickest things you can do to ruin something great. And you are someone and something great no matter what's going on in your life at this time, and you get to define what your strength looks like. So start with focusing on you, taking care of yourself, defying anybody else's opinions or beliefs about what strength looks like, and just start pouring into yourself in the same way that you're probably pouring into others, except you need to be the priority.
Yes. I think that's perfectly said. Drop the mic, shut the door. It's done. You know, stop the car. You know, that's well said. I think the only thing I would contribute to that is go ahead and follow Mrs. Monique Williams. I put the link on here for you to follow her on Amazon and get her books. She also has one which she forgot to mention for children. So for all our Black and brown babies out there, there's a children's journal. Can you tell them briefly what can they find in the children's journal?
Yes, so it's focused on social and emotional learning. And this particular one is for elementary and middle school or junior high school age children. So it's going to help them to be more intentional about understanding their thoughts and the things that they're feeling and how to shift the things that they might be thinking that's contributing to what they feel, and just how to be more emotionally aware and emotionally intelligent, as well as how to be more socially aware and know how to take better care of themselves, how to choose the right friends, how to be intentional about the folks that are around them. There's 30 different affirmations in there to remind your lovely children or nieces or nephews of how amazing they are. This particular one is actually for all children, but of course, beautiful Black and brown children are highlighted in it. But there's a lot there. It's absolutely worth checking it out. If you go to my website, strengthredefined.com, you'll see descriptions of both of the books as well as where you can purchase them. And feel free to reach out through the website if you have questions as well.
Absolutely. Excuse me. So I just put the link in for the Children's Journal for all of the educators, because I know there's a lot of educators that listen to the show as well. Also, a lot of helping professionals and providers. You need to have this journal in your lobby area. Copies. If you do any groups, encourage your school systems to have this book on hand. Again, I think we have to start with redefining strength in youth and how we are raising our children, that it's okay for not just young women to cry, but also young men to cry, and for them to name their emotions. We learn early on about self-betrayal because people start to violate our boundaries and or force us to do things that we're not comfortable in our youth. And that stuff translates and trickles into adulthood. So Mrs. Monique Williams, thank you so much for joining Conversations with Coach La tonight. This has been a profound conversation about redefining strength. It's always a pleasure to meet another practitioner of color. And it's just beautiful. And I love that you have tools that people can use that are tangible, well-written, they're beautifully done, they're colorful, like all of the things that when you see it, you go, yes. That's a bet on self moment. I love it. I love to see it. I love that for us. I love that for you. Any other closing thoughts that you want to tell people about therapy, bet on self moments, just what you're reading?
You know, I haven't been doing much reading because I've been writing these books, and I'm about to start writing the next one, which is going to be the one focused on adolescents.
Okay.
And there will be one for men as well. I've been told that I spend a lot of time on women and that men need this work too. And I heard it and I receive it. So those will be the next two. But if you take nothing else away from this, bet on yourself by taking care of yourself first, and then you can pour into anyone else afterwards.
Absolutely. Thank you again for joining Conversations with Coach La tonight. You've been listening to the Urban Heat on 98.1 FM. We are an iHeart radio station. I want you guys to continue to tune in. We are streaming live 24/7. And tomorrow morning, you'll be able to listen to the Morning Cafe with my favorite morning crew, SB John, Moonlight, and Dita and DJ Wade. So you want to make sure you keep it locked. Make sure you follow us, keep us streaming, and don't go nowhere because we have some music playing. So if you're still up, you can jam out with us for the rest of the night. So I want to thank you again. You guys can tune in next week for another episode of Conversations with Coach La. It's been amazing speaking with you. I know you got to get back to your family. I guess the kids are already sleeping though. So
they definitely are.
They all good now. But I want to hopefully have you come back again when you finish the next book. Okay. And thank you. And thank you so much. And I'll see you again soon.
Yeah.
And have a wonderful evening, everyone. And we will see you next week for another episode of Conversations with Coach La. Good evening.